The Coalition of Texans with Disabilities Raise Your Voice 2022. Voting, October 10th, 2022.
So thank y'all for joining us. I'm Chase Bearden. My audio description, I'm a white male. I'm wearing a green shirt today. It is a t-shirt. I'm not wearing a dress shirt because it is a holiday and we planned very poorly today and are making y'all attend on this day. In my background is a poorly painted wall. For those of you who've never been to our building, it used to be an old guitar shop, and this was kind of where they had their bar and cash register. And when we ripped it out to make me a little office, we haven't painted. Behind that is a picture of Everest when our organization went with a group of people that you can see in the background, and then a mix of old plastic flowers that I think are about 30 years old that have followed us from building to building. With that being said, thank you all for coming today. You know, our discussion is voting, something that we've worked on for years. And today, what we really wanted to get out of this was, what do we see coming in the near future, not just for this election? You know, what are we hearing? What issues might come up? But also, there were so many changes in the last election that we want to make sure everyone has good information. You know, there's misinformation that's out there because of there being just a lack of knowledge. And we want to make sure that as people cast their ballots, they aren't rejected for any reason, and that you have a good voting experience. And also so that we hear back from y'all after the election on how things went. Did you run into issues? Because if we don't know what the problems are, if we don't hear from y'all, or if y'all hear from other people, please pass that along to us, to Molly at Disability Rights Texas, or Jeff. That way we can work on that during the legislative session. There are already areas that we know we're going to have to address, and we're already probably in the process of banging our heads into a wall to figure out how to do it. But we are working on it, and this will be a top issue, I know, for our organization, and we'll spend a lot of time working on this. Also today, you know, voting is difficult in Texas. Don't kid yourself. So if there is a question you have, no matter if you think it's silly and everyone else will know, I guarantee you, ask it. Most people won't ask the question, but if you ask it and we can answer it, then everyone will feel more comfortable with it. So feel free as we get to that portion to really dive in. We got people that if we can't answer it, we will find out for you and track that information down. But we want today to just be kind of a very open-ended conversation about where we're heading and how we can get there as a group and a community. So first, I want to start off with Jennifer Harris. We've worked with Jennifer and part of the team that she works with, Secure Democracy, for a couple years now. A lot last session on really trying to protect disability rights votes and everyone else's. And Jennifer, they would love to hear where you see things heading in the future, what y'all are hearing. And Secure Democracy is not just in Texas, they're all over the country. And so there's a great amount of information and knowledge that flows from them to us to be able to do a lot of the policy work we do. So Jennifer, I'm going to turn it over to you and let you speak about it. Thanks.
Thanks, Chase. Hi, my name is Jennifer Harris, and I am a white woman with sort of brownish blonde hair that's a little longer than shoulder length. I'm wearing a blue shirt and blue scarf around my neck. And I'm sitting in my office, which has an assortment of photographs and artwork behind me, mostly bands from the 1990s and 1980s that I like to listen to. But there's also a Good Trouble poster, Getting Into Good Trouble, right over my shoulder as well, which is always a good reminder in terms of the work that I do and that you all do in terms of defending voting rights. And as Chase mentioned, I am here today representing Secure Democracy. And Secure Democracy, if you're not familiar with our organization, is a nonpartisan nonprofit that is working across about 20 different states in the United States and occasionally at the federal level as well, to build confidence in our elections and improve voter access. And as Chase mentioned, we have been so grateful and privileged to have CTD and the disability community as such a key ally for us and our work here in Texas. And certainly their insight and expertise on these issues as we look and work in other states as well. I think I will say we're looking at things through a couple of different lenses. Obviously, as Chase noted, there's an election coming up. And we certainly know there were a lot of changes that came about last session that have impacted the way you vote or made things perhaps more difficult for some voters. And so we're obviously watching this very closely, especially mail ballots and how that process works for people. We saw alarmingly high rejection rates back in the primary elections back in the spring that lowered down as it went to the runoff in the May elections, but still is higher than what you would like to see in terms of rejection rates, kind of the industry standard, if you will, for such things at the state level. So that is one area as we head into November, expecting a very large turnout and expecting a considerable number of mail ballot requests to be something that we'll keep working on and looking for. So your feedback there about your own personal experiences or those that you're hearing from your friends, your family, your colleagues is critically important to not only CTD, but to us as well, just to get a real eyes and ears on the ground perspective as to what is happening, because that is an area that we will want to address next session in terms of cleaning up some of the most egregious problems that came out of SB1 and the new voting rules. The other aspect that we're looking at in terms of impact, and it's not so much, you may or may not see it as a direct impact on your vote and how you cast your vote in November, but it could play a role in just how the elections are handled and how quickly results are shared. Is you may be or may not be familiar with a recent Attorney General's opinion that said that election officials must provide members of the public and legislators with access to voted ballots prior to the expiration of this 22-month retention period, which is in current federal and state law, requiring that the ballots be held securely and not accessed. What this sort of opens the door to is the notion of public audits, or that anyone can come in and examine the ballots. And while that has been the case, there has been this waiting or retention period before just any and everyone could get their hands on the ballots for some obvious reasons why you wouldn't necessarily want that going on. The concern, given the AG's recent opinion, is how much additional workload that puts on local election officials who are trying to obviously do mail ballots, conduct early voting, and conduct the general election day vote in their communities. And frankly, since the Attorney General issued this opinion, counties have been inundated with requests. What it did was accelerate the time that folks could ask for 2020 election ballots. And it's sort of already put into queue and signaled from some individuals and groups that they intend to make very immediate requests of this November elections ballots. All of this to say, again, it may or may not directly impact you, other than it does put an incredible burden on our local election officials in terms of staffing and security and extra manpower to manage and respond to all of these requests. Time will tell how long this opinion sort of stands and whether or not lawmakers or local county officials bandy together to sort of push back on what the Attorney General has suggested, because this is not law, it's a non-binding opinion, but certainly there's concern that if election officials don't follow the opinion or fulfill the requests that may come in as a result of it, that they could face lawsuits of their own, which again is just costing more and takes up more of their manpower and time. So those are some things that we're looking at immediately before we even get into the next legislative session in January. But from our standpoint, we'll very much want to stay in close contact with you all throughout this November process and as we head into session next year, because as I said, I feel like the disability community's voice is so essential and so influential in so many different offices around the Capitol, and the work that Chase and Dennis have done there on this issue has been tremendous. So a note of thanks for all of your work and this community's voice being lifted up in the ways that you do.
Thanks, Jennifer. And for those of y'all that don't know, later on when we start talking about mail-in ballots, we'll get into being able to track your ballot and being able to carry your ballot. And Secure Democracy was a big push behind that. So it does give, I think, more confidence in mail-in ballots because you're able to do that. And it's a little clunky still on how to do it, and the state is rolling it out, but we do have it. So we'll get to that in a second. First, I want to put up a poll. I meant to do this at the beginning, just to run in the background, and I'll read the question really quick. What is your knowledge or comfort level with voting this topic? You know the issue. Whoa, I think we got the wrong poll. Never mind. That's from last time. We're going to go ahead and cancel that. So basically, we were going to ask, if you're planning on voting, early voting at the polls. Oh, there it is. Laura got it going. All right, I'm going to let her do that instead of me trying to fiddle around. But how do you plan to vote in the November midterms? In person on election day, in person early voting, mail-in ballot, or not voting? And the only reason we're asking this, and we're going to let it run while we talk, is just to get an idea where people are comfortable. Other things before we jump over into our panel and start talking is key dates that are coming up. Tomorrow is the first key date. It is the last day you can register to vote or change your address. So if you need to do that, or someone who does, it has to be done by tomorrow. The first day to vote early voting is October 24th. The last day to apply for your vote mail-in ballot. So if you want to vote by mail and you're a registered voter, you have to send in an application for it. And that will be every year you have to do that. So if you want to vote by mail and you haven't filled out the application, that is due by October 28th. Now, one tip, do not wait that long. You will barely get it in time to fill it out and then get it back. You are running up against a time clock at that point. Get it done as soon as possible if you're going to use a mail-in ballot. The last day to early vote will be November 4th, and election day will be November 8th. So those are kind of key dates. We'll also put those in the follow-up email so that y'all know and have those. We'll also supply y'all with some links to some of these other websites like Disability Rights Texas and the League of Women Voters, who have some excellent resources, way more than we could even entertain putting together. So we are just pointing everyone to these two websites that have already done an amazing job on creating all of this. And so with that being said, I want to jump over to Molly and Jeff, both with Disability Rights Texas, who have done amazing voting work with us, and kind of give them a chance to introduce themselves and then jump into maybe talking about giving y'all some questions and letting y'all answer them off the cuff. We didn't really plan any of this, but I know they know how to roll with these. They've been doing it every day for, it seems like, the whole life. But Molly, I'll let you jump in, and then Jeff, if you want to introduce yourself.
Yeah, can everybody hear me all right? Make sure that's okay. My name is Molly Broadway. I am the training and technical support specialist for voting rights here at Disability Rights Texas. Been doing this job for about 7 years now. So what I do is I go around the state talking to individuals about what their voting rights are and the types of accommodations they can receive. I also work with election officials to make sure they're doing everything they're supposed to best serve voters with disabilities. I also inspect polling sites to make sure they are ADA compliant. And basically, if you call me and ask me to do something, I'll probably end up doing it. So whatever you need, I'll probably help you out. I also get to hang out and bother Jeff during legislative sessions to make sure he's entertained while he's doing his policy work. Jeff, do you want to introduce yourself?
Sure. Can you hear me? I'm having technical difficulty,
Yes.
but anyway, I'm Jeff Miller. I am the voting policy specialist at Disability Rights Texas. Excuse me. And that means that I get to work with all of the wonderful policymakers down at the Capitol and try to explain to them why some of the things that they are proposing as far as changes in our election laws are going to negatively impact people with disabilities. I also get to work with people like Chase and Dennis to try to convince them once they make those decisions how wrong they were and try to come up with some positive ways to fix those mistakes that have been made and make things easier for everybody to vote, including voters with disabilities.
And I would say, Jeff, we were probably 50-50 on that this last go round. Well, maybe not that generous on our side, but we did improve some of the things.
Some really bad stuff, absolutely.
We did. But there are some things that made it through, and I think they really do deserve some time and attention, along with things that passed in the original bill that were then recently changed due to court decisions. So I just kind of want to kick off. What were some of the highlights, Jeff, of what came out of that we need to address today for this next election?
So one of the things that people may remember that, and if you don't remember what passed, you're not alone, because the bill changed about 7 different times from January to September when it was finally passed. So if you don't remember what was actually in the last version of the bill, don't worry about it, nobody does. But in the final version of SB1 that was passed and ultimately signed by the governor, the #1 biggest change and biggest concern that we at Disability Rights Texas had for the disability community is that under federal law, both the Americans with Disabilities Act and the Voting Rights Act, a voter with a disability has the right to have assistance from anyone that they choose. And any kind of assistance that is reasonable, as a reasonable accommodation to their support need, should be allowed. What SB1 did in the name of trying to protect voters with disabilities is limit the types of assistance that a voter could receive during in-person voting. And it limited the assistance to either reading the ballot for the individual, marking the ballot for the individual, or directing the individual with a disability to read or mark the ballot. As you're probably aware, and not only did the law say that, it also said that if I was assisting someone in in-person voting, I had to sign an oath. And that oath specifically, in that oath, I had to promise that I would limit my assistance to those things that were in the statute. And I had to sign that oath under penalty of perjury, meaning it was a state jail felony if I provided any other kinds of assistance. So that was our biggest concern, because we really believe that that violates federal law. And so it became part of a lawsuit, or several lawsuits, I shall say, that have been filed on behalf of several different organizations over the past year. And that lawsuit is continuing. However, in June of this year, a federal district court said that based on a previous case that had been brought in Texas and a settlement agreement that had been reached, that portion of SB1 that limited the kinds of assistance that somebody could receive, or that mandated someone swear to an oath for something that violated the law, those were unenforceable. So those things are no longer going to be enforced. So if you know somebody that needs assistance, or you need assistance and it needs to go beyond marking or directing someone to mark the ballot or read the ballot, i.e. maybe you need somebody to answer questions or to assist you in other ways, that is now perfectly allowable. And the guidance from the Secretary of State's office to election officials does include that information. So hopefully it won't be a problem. We're concerned it might be, but that's why we're going to be around while the polls are open. If you know of anybody that has that issue, have them call us and we'll get it fixed.
And Jeff, I kind of just wanted to show something to y'all, and I don't know how well y'all will be able to see this. And I'm sorry, but this is the mail-in ballot that came to me in the mail. This is the envelope that you send it back in, you put your ballot in. I don't know if y'all see that big black bar right in the middle. That is the instructions that got crossed out at the last minute before they could mail them out because of that. And it was basically reverting it back to the old directions. And I found that interesting that that's the way they did it. But you're not missing something if you notice that it jumps to number 3 before starting what system can be offered.
Hats off to the county for being cost conscious and not reprinting everything. So, you know,
it's a good thing.
Dollars at work.
And I'm going to drop in the chat Disability Rights phone number and their email address. That way, if y'all run into any issues, and Molly, you might want to talk about the new poll watchers and how confusion there by some of their training might affect this and cause, with assistance and other things, a need for watching.
Yeah, basically I will, the easiest way to summarize this is that the new voting laws have now allowed poll watchers to have more freedom in where they go and to not be as restricted at the polling sites as they were previously. So what this means is if you are a voter who asks for assistance when completing your ballot, if you ask a poll worker, someone who's working the election site, if you ask them to help you, to assist you in completing your ballot, then the poll watcher has the right to watch y'all's interaction and watch you fill out your ballot and then check the ballot after you've completed it and it's printed out. They can check the ballot to make sure that if the election workers marked the ballot the way you want them to, basically. If you have someone of your own choosing, so if you bring someone to assist you at the polling site, the poll watcher cannot observe you and your assistant during this process, and they cannot check your ballot. So there is that. Basically, there's a lot of, like Chase said previously, there's a lot of information, there's a lot of misinformation being shed out there about what can and cannot happen. I think people are especially nervous in regards to the poll watcher portion of this, but just know that as a voter, you know, you have the right to still ask for assistance if it is someone you've brought on your own. The poll watcher cannot watch that. They cannot be right up next to you and the assistant, making sure they do what they need to do, and they don't have the right to check your ballot. Even if they ask, they don't have the right to do that. The role of the poll watcher is to observe. That's it. They're not there. They should not interfere or try to intervene in you casting your ballot. They take the information and they report that in what they've observed to the parties that they're working for, basically.
Poll watcher should not be talking with a voter.
Yeah.
If they suspect that something is going on that shouldn't, their responsibility is to inform an election judge and let the election judge handle it. I think that's one of the confusions over, there was lots of debate on how far the rights of poll watchers were going to expand during SB1. And where it ended up was not quite as bad as we were afraid that it would get.
Right.
So while a poll watcher does have the right to observe someone being assisted in the polls, once you get actually up to the voting machine, that's when the poll watcher has to back off and let you have your privacy.
And now there are 2 people that legally cannot help you or assist you in any way while you're voting. And this is just good knowledge because, you know, I almost got myself tripped up in this helping one of our members, is that there are legally only 2 people that cannot, and that is your employer or your union rep. if you have one. Those have been in law for a long time that they cannot assist you in voting anyway. So probably not something that happens often, but just for your.
When it says your employer, that means an agent of your employer. So it doesn't have to be the guy that owns the company. Your supervisor cannot or should not be assisting you to vote. Anyone that has control over anything at your company.
Yep. Just FYI, I think that's always a good one. Something I didn't realize for a long time, but that has been in the law for a long time. Also, I just checked the polls, and the reason I checked that was about 63% planned to early vote and about 26% mail-in ballots. And I want to go back to mail-in ballots really quickly because there have been some changes. You know, say you've sent in your application, you're not sure where your mail-in ballot is. You can go online to the Secretary of State's website, check their mail-in ballot tracker, which we'll put in the follow-up email. You can fill in your information and you can see where that ballot's at and if there's a problem. Now, one thing you want to make sure you do on the changes, you know, Jeff and I had talked about this a lot, and I had my ballot here somewhere, is underneath the flap when you
Don't lose that, Chase.
I won't.
Don't
I'll
lose.
try
Yeah.
not to lose it. Yeah, I'll be in trouble. Underneath the flap, you don't just sign it anymore. You have to include either the last 4 digits of your social security number or your driver's license number, either two. They suggest both. You can only put one if you want, if you're only comfortable giving that much personal information, but you need to make sure you do that and sign it. If it doesn't have both, you know, one of the number sets and your signature, then they're going to reject it. And that happened in the primaries because people were not used to this new change, and it's not real evident on the envelope. And 1 out of 8 ballots were rejected. Be clear, 1 out of 8. That was almost 23,000 ballots were thrown out from the election. Our primaries are small. They are not big. And yes, those 23,000 people probably learned that in this election, what they need to do. But think of how many people didn't vote in the primaries and don't know that. So make sure that once you've filled it out, right below that, there is a very small line that says cell phone number and email, optional. Put one of the two. Don't leave those blank. Why would you want them to have those? They can't contact you if there's a problem with your ballot. And that is now in the law that they are supposed to, if they have time, contact if there's a problem with the ballot so that you can cure your ballot and fix it. But if they don't know how to get a hold of you, which that's why it's optional, you won't be notified soon enough if you're not checking the tracker every day to see that your ballot is good. So make sure you don't just put the ID numbers on there and your signature, but you also include your cell phone number or your email address. So that way you make sure that you can get that up to speed and correct. So next, Molly, let's move back to curbside voting and drive-through voting. There were changes there. I know curbside voting's been a big issue over the years. What are some of the best suggestions if someone's going to use it? Is it still allowed?
Yeah. So basically, I'll summarize it this way for curbside voting. It's always been available. It's just not widely publicized, but curbside voting is an accommodation you can receive at every polling site in the state of Texas. And it exists for the purpose of if a voter cannot make it into the polling site without, what's that?
Safely, yeah.
Safe, yeah, I was going to say safely without causing, harm to themselves or others. So that is available to every voter. How, in a perfect world, how that is supposed to happen, how you access that is there's supposed to be a designated curbside voting spot located at every polling site. Traditionally, it's an accessible parking space or any other parking space. There is a sign that says accessible or curbside voting. in a perfect world, what's supposed to happen is there is an alarm or a button you can press, and it alerts the poll workers inside the building to let them know you're there. Your spot in line is saved, and when your spot in line comes up, the poll workers will bring out the ballot to you. You can mark it accordingly, and then you can cast your ballot, and they take the machine back into the polling site, and you're good to go.
But Molly, my last observation was that this isn't a perfect world.
Well, do you remember those rose-colored glasses I sent you, Jeff? If you put those on, it would be. Yeah, so you're right. It's not a perfect world. Because it's not, what we suggest to people is calling ahead of time to your county elections office to let them know you're going to be, essentially to make a date to curbside vote. So just if you have that kind, if you want to be super cautious, call your elections office and say, you know what, I'm going to show up on October 27th at the HEB on Broadway Street at 2:45 in a red car. Look for me then, because I'm going to curbside vote. And so that way it alerts the poll workers to kind of keep an eye out for you. That way, if they get super busy, they will know that you're coming. They are slightly prepared for it. So that's what we always suggest for folks. And if that doesn't work, bring a big rock with you that you can throw at the door, and maybe that'll help.
And I have one more suggestion before you throw a rock, is that put your county elections phone number in your phone. It's something you need to do anyways. Just type in your county name and elections. That phone number will be available when you pull up to the polling site you're at. If no one comes out fairly quickly, call the elections office and then tell them you're out front and no one's come out. I need someone. They have a phone number that you probably can't get, or they can get a hold of the election judge so that they can bring it out to you. That's always an option. Get familiar with your elections office. I think that's a phone number everyone should learn how to find and use, because you may not just need it for that. You may end up at a polling site that's not accessible. And I know Jeff and I spoke at the Secretary of State's election law seminar, and we had one of the smaller counties get up and ask a question about, is there any grant funding? Because we don't have accessibility in our, I can't get our county's commissioners to put enough funds to get ramps into all of our places. And I was kind of shocked that they said that there at the event. But it shows that we still don't have complete accessibility, and we need to know where that is. So if you run across that, definitely call Molly, Jeff, me, someone, and let us know.
And I'll also say, just in connection to the curbside voting, it is not the poll workers, it is not within their realm of expertise to decide whether or not you can indeed cast your ballot. You have the right to cast your ballot curbside. The fact that you've requested it, that should be enough, and they should then oblige by providing your ballot curbside. They're not there to decide whether or not you meet the eligibility guidelines for it. Also, with drive-through voting, sometimes people use this term intermittently, or they exchange it but with curbside voting, but it's actually pretty different. We saw drive-through voting happen in Harris County during the pandemic, and that was created in an attempt to, better help people who were concerned about, going into the polling site to make, because of the pandemic, and just to make voting more accessible for people with their health concerns. During the session, the legislature outlawed that. There's now laws that outlaw drive-through voting to where you cannot drop off your ballot at a designated drive-through voting site. But it wasn't really a thing pre-2020. It's not a thing now. So it's, if you don't live in Harris County, you really didn't miss anything. So it's the same old, same old.
Yeah. And some final tips, I guess, on some of this would be, if you do a mail-in ballot and you do need help filling it out in any way, please make sure the person that helped you fills out the assistance portion. That is considered a very serious crime if they don't.
It's a big
So make
jail
sure-
felony. A year in jail.
So please make sure anyone who assists you that they fill that portion of it out. Also, if you're going to the polling sites and you're wanting to use the accessible machine, if there's any issues with it, I still always suggest that if you're visually impaired and going to the polls, that you take a set of headphones that has the old school stereo jack so that you can plug it into the machine, because usually what happens is the ones they have are broken or they have no idea where they're at. So be preemptive. Yes, they are required to be accessible, but at the same time, if you're down to election day and no one can find headphones, your only option at that point will be to either allow them to help assist you, which is up to you. But if you're wanting to cast that ballot, on your own, I always suggest just carrying a spare pair. I wouldn't bring them out at first. I'd make them hunt for theirs first so that they learn and know where they're at. And also to get familiar with the machines that are being used in your county. You can contact your county and see what machines they're using. I think, doesn't DRTX have some videos on each machine and how to use them? I believe on the
Yes.
website.
Yes.
It's a good chance to go and look at them. There are some changes with some of these newer machines. Get familiar with them before you go in, and don't feel rushed. No matter how long that line is, you're there to vote. Take your time. Don't let people rush you because they poorly planned and now they got a line out to 2 miles back. Other things are that if the line is long, you do have the option to go up and request either moving out towards the front of the line or being able to wait inside where there's a little more air conditioning. You just have to ask the judge. Now it is their choice if they'll let you. Unfortunately, we couldn't make that mandatory, but it is a voluntary thing, but you can make that request, especially if it's something like you can't stand for very long or you can't be out in the sun or the heat or the rain. So
Just to go along with that, Chase, if I could just mention real quick, another part of SB 1 that was passed specifically puts into state law a federal requirement. And it basically says that if you are a voter with a disability and you need a reasonable accommodation of some kind to be able to vote, then you have the right to make that request. And by extension, the county has the ability to make changes in either policies or setup or whatever to allow you the support that you need. So it's always okay to ask if you really need some kind of accommodation in order to cast your ballot independently and privately.
And that kind of will lead me to one more thing before we get to question and answers. So many of y'all have requested over the years, being able to get an accessible mail-in ballot so that you could do it on your own at home and be able to mail that back. We thought that little amendment that was put into the bill would have covered that. Unfortunately, it is still being litigated and we are not there yet. We are going to work on that this session. It may just happen that at the last minute that might be available in one county. We don't know yet. We are working hard at that and we haven't stopped, but as of right now, the mail-in ballots still are not accessible to allow someone their rights and to be able to cast a accessible mail-in ballot on their own. But we are still working on that and we'll continue. So Jeff, Molly, can y'all hang on for a minute? We're gonna just open it up. People that have questions about any kind of accessibility or anything around voting, and we'll just open up the floor. You raise your hand, unmute. Julie Espinoza.
I have quite a bit to say. I'm with Rev Up Texas, and we are doing a Get Out the Disability Vote campaign from October 1st through November 8th. And I've got a wonderful flyer for anyone that wants to join this campaign to help get out the vote. It is a grassroots effort. It's got all the important voting date information, how to mobilize the vote with social media, early voting, mail-in ballot voting. It's a really good strategy for people if they want to get involved, even if it's just using their Facebook or understanding, helping others understand what's on the ballot. So I'm going to put my email in the chat so that you can contact me if you would love this lovely flyer emailed to you.
Perfect. And also I put in there the League of Women Voters website, which has some really good videos too on the mail-in ballots and all the information, like how to fill the new one out. It's a great video. I mean, it literally takes you step by step and shows you all of the changes. We were thought about showing that, but I didn't think you want to watch a video for 8 minutes on mail-in ballots when we had two amazing people to talk to. But any other questions on this voting election or registration or how to get people to the polls?
I'm sorry. Okay.
Mary, did you?
Well, I don't have any question.
Okay, Mary, did you raise your hand, Mary? Go ahead.
So I just wanted to go back to the mail-in ballots and entering those numbers on the flap. I'm a deputy voter registrar, and what we've been encouraging people to do is to put both of them. I mean, I understand what you're saying about the concern about keeping your information private, but my understanding is that a number of the ballots, mail-in ballots that were rejected because what they're looking for is the number that you put on your vote when you registered to vote on your voter registration application. And so if you put down the last 4 digits of your social security number, but what you had put on your voter registration application was your Texas ID number, they're going to reject the ballot. So what we were told was that the safest practice is to put both of those.
Yeah. And I think that's a good practice. Also something you can do is, later on down the road, if you want to, is re-register and make sure that you put your state ID number or your driver's license number, so that way you don't have to supply both, because it is something we brought up. You're supplying your signature and a whole lot of valid personal information, and it's a very easy envelope to see. But
Thank you.
understandable.
Thank
Ron?
you. I was filling it out today and I left only one, my non-driver's license number. So I'm going to go back and put that other number. I have to get my registration out to get the numbers from the registration, but I can send it. Thanks for the information.
You're welcome. And check that tracker in a few days and make sure it got there and it's all okay.
Yeah.
I would also say, yeah, put in both of those numbers if you can, but also make sure your voter registration is up to date with your current address, especially if you're going to be applying for ballot by mail. I've been doing a lot of that with people this last week, is just updating their addresses. And that doesn't take very long. And if you're going to do your application for ballot by mail anyway, you might as well knock it out as well.
I have a quick question.
Yeah.
Jeez, man, on the for this past year, I tried to say the primary, excuse me. I sent in 2 different times my ballot with both numbers on them, and they were denied both times. And I cannot figure out what, because we double checked, the numbers were correct. And we're still denied twice.
Your signature was on there too?
Right.
Did you ever contact your elections office for your county?
I think I tried to get it on the website. I could never really figure it out.
Did you receive a notice from the elections office?
Yes.
And it should have had the reason that your ballot was rejected in that notice.
I certainly did not see a reason. Maybe I overlooked it, but I sure did not see it. And then I was told that I was no longer able to vote in that election.
Molly, do you want to take this one offline and maybe help Suzanne reach out to that elections office and make sure everything's all right?
Yeah, Suzanne, let me get in touch with you outside of this and we'll see what we can do, make sure everything's legit. I don't know if phone or email is a good way to get hold of you.
We'll connect the two of you. I believe
Perfect.
we have all y'all's information.
Yeah.
Thank you.
You got it.
How do we get to the tracker?
Okay, go under the Secretary of State's website. Let me share screen real quick. I think I can help guide you through it. Help me remember too, if I haven't already turned it off on mine.
I can pull it up as well. It should be.
I don't have it on mine. Molly, if you want to bring it up and I'll give you.
Yeah, I'll put a link in the chat and then I can do whatever else you want me to.
There we go. Oh yeah, just a link might work.
You have to access it through oh gosh, votetexas.gov. So the Secretary of State's website. And it's going to be under Track My Ballot.
Yeah.
Okay, so if you go to the chat down below, you should see a link to it.
It's important to know that on this portal, there's a slew of informational questions to answer, and you have to fill it all out. You can't just skip some pieces of information. Like there's your voter information section asks for the last 4 digits of your social security and your driver's license or ID number. You need to put in both of those. And then you need to put in your address and your county and all of that stuff. So just heads up.
It is a little clunky. I ran into some problems at one point because I put drive, like you put in your address, and I'm used to putting in my address with, drive or lane, but there's actually a little button below it that you put driver lane. So you really have to, it is the probably most clunky one I've ever seen. So if it rejects you the first time, look at it again, take a breath. And if you can't get it to work after a couple of tries.
Well, and it's important to note as well that you can have someone assist you log into this. So that's not forbidden by any means as of right now. So if you need assistance with someone getting online with you and filling out this form, that's allowed as well.
Any other questions?
A lot of information, but know that if something comes up, if you have it looks like Marianne has a comment.
I had a question and okay, this is what it is. So like people at my church have been talking about like helping people physically get to polls, and I'm just curious about whether anything in the law limits like how many people you can help physically transport to the polls.
So if you're talking about just a ride to the polls to then go inside and vote, not curbside voting, there's nothing that would prohibit you from giving anybody that you choose a ride to the polls and they go in and vote. If you're going to give them a ride to curbside vote, the new law requires if you have 7 or more people that are unrelated to you, that you give a ride to curbside vote. There's a new form that the driver has to fill out that includes the driver's name and address, and then a statement as to whether or not the driver just drove them to curbside vote or assisted them in voting.
Okay.
But in either way, you're still not prohibited from giving someone a ride. It's just if they're curbside voting and there's a lot of people, so you have a van or a bus or something, then you're going to have to fill out an additional form.
Okay. All right, thank you.
Do we have any more questions? And you can always contact us at any time. We're all available up through the elections and onward. Oh, Laura has one over there. Okay.
No questions from Laura. Sorry.
Hey, okay, so I don't know if this falls into y'all's jurisdiction. I'm going to be out of town the entire early voting and voting period. So I asked Travis County what I should do, and they said I should apply for the federal postcard. What is it called?
Are you going to the moon?
Yeah.
Or where you, I mean, no,
It's an absentee ballot that you go through federal rather than state.
I guess my question is, where would you be going? Are you going just to like another county? Are you going to another country?
I'm sorry, could you say that again? I was having a sound issue.
Are you going to be out of the country?
Yes.
Okay,
That's why.
Okay.
Yeah, so that thing is, that's what they offer voters in the military who are stationed
Right.
across overseas. Yeah, and so that's probably that's interesting that they said you can apply for that.
Isn't that interesting?
Yeah.
And they email you your ballot.
Yeah.
Yeah, you can vote online or get your ballot online, unlike other.
I still have to print it out and mail it in. But Chase and I were joking, like, if people need accessible ballots, maybe they could just take a vacation.
And vote from Mexico.
Yeah.
Well, I bet there's a megabus we could all take, a megabus ride down to Mexico or something, then we can just all get our ballots emailed to us.
The driver would probably have to fill out a form.
Oh, that's true. That's true.
My question is, everything that y'all have said about the mail-in ballot and all of that, does that hold for that because I used a different application, or is the ballot, at this point now that I have the ballot, is it the same?
You know, under the laws, and Jeff, you can chime in on this, but under the laws, it doesn't talk about the federal postcard, the FPCA one. It's all about the state.
Fill out the form that's required for the federal form. So yeah, I don't think that there's
Just fill it out accordingly
under the federal form that you put a voter ID number on it, which is, so you shouldn't have to do the numbers.
Yeah, that's interesting.
More of a reason to go to the International Space Station to vote.
Okay, all right, I might email you with some follow-ups.
And as y'all can see, these bills were rushed. We went 3 special sessions. Then they had to figure out how to implement them with massive changes. And right now, just be prepared. I mean, there are election officials quitting left and right.
Still a lot of gray area.
There is a lot of gray area and a lot of fear, because it puts any mistake becomes not just a felony on the actual election official. They lose their retirement. There's a lot at stake. So there are some legitimate fears. Yeah. So any problems you run into, I hope that everything runs smoothly for everyone. But even in the best situations, we do have errors. We do have people that are, going to be at the last minute signing up to become poll workers and may not know the whole system or may not know all about accessibility. Please let us know. And, make sure that everyone is voting and having their voice made. And I'm going to end with allowing Dennis to acknowledge our sponsors, since I do not have that sheet in front of me and I want to put him on the spot. And if y'all have any other questions after that, feel free to to stay on, or give us a call. And Suzanne, we'll connect you and Molly.
Thanks, Chase. And as we talk about this, this really was, I really want to give credit to, our friends at Secure Democracy with Jennifer and Jeff and Molly with Disability Rights Texas and my colleague Chase. This was an unbelievable battle last year. It really was a tooth and nail kind of thing. And it sounded like a lot of stuff was done. It was. But the things that were prevented that they wanted to shove down people's throats was much, much worse. So hats off, guys. And one thing that hasn't changed is it is important to vote. So my message will be, remember to vote and encourage others. We always say that in the disability community, one of the reasons people don't vote is they hear horror stories from their friends. Well, let's change that. Let's just make it encouragement from their friends to go and vote. And if there's stuff that doesn't work out, let us know. Let Disability Rights Texas know, let CTD know, let the League of Women Voters know, whomever, and because this is the kind of ammunition we need. As always, Raise Your Voice comes without any fees or charge to our participants. And the reason we're able to do this are our sponsors. Welcoming back AbbVie, which has just joined us as a sponsor. In addition to Amgen, AstraZeneca, We Work for Health Texas, Touch of Class and GRAIL, and our top sponsors really make this happen for a year at a stretch. They commit to supporting us for a year to do this. United Healthcare, Superior Health Plan, BristolMyersSquibb, and Amerigroup. Okay, remember to vote. Remember, don't, you always hear this election is so important, the most important in your lifetime. Well, they all are important, but this one is the most important in your lifetime. So vote.
Well, and I think it's important to say, I know we're probably preaching to the choir, but I always like to tell people who tell me why vote, there's no value in it. It's not that important. And I always say, if it didn't matter, they wouldn't be trying to put all these laws on it. They would not be paying attention to it if it didn't matter at all.